my website. There's cards, public constitutions, information on the study group, on your tables. I do have more as they're needed. This talk is going to skim over some of the basic information and emphasize the power of the 10th Amendment. And to borrow the slogan of the 10th Amendment Center, the Constitution, every issue, every time, no exceptions, no excuses. So let's start with words that when they were first written were both treason and heresy. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable, inseparable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and property. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, and whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right and the duty of the people to alter or to abolish it. And for the support of this declaration with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. So why was this treason and heresy? Well, under the law of the English monarchy, only the king had rights, and he granted privileges to his inferiors and rescinded those privileges whenever he wanted. Stating that a farmhand had rights was treason under English law and heresy under the Church of England, since the king was also the head of the church. The 56 men who signed the declaration were risking death by hanging and leaving their families in penury and destitution from risk of attainder if we failed to win independence. The Declaration refers to unalienable rights. Well, what does that mean? The definition of unalienable is unable to be taken away or given away by the possessor. Inherent, cannot be liened, such as a mortgage or a tax lien. What's a right? A right is something you can do without asking anybody for permission. It's defined by Black's Law Dictionary as a power, faculty, or demand inherent in one person and incident upon another, or the powers of free action. Rights are inherent and can never be removed from us. Its opposite is privilege. A privilege is something you can do only when you have permission, and Black's Law Dictionary defines privilege as a peculiar benefit or advantage enjoyed by a person, company, or class beyond the common advantages of other citizens. Privileges are granted, and they can be revoked. Rights and privileges are opposites. If we expand from this definition of rights, we can also say that all rights derive from property. Starting with the first piece of property you ever owned the day you're born, your body. If you cannot control what happens to your body, you are a slave. Every right implies a responsibility, and we can give away jurisdiction over our rights by relinquishing our responsibility. And the only limitation on your rights is the equal rights of others. So whenever a dispute arises about whether something is a right or a privilege, the argument can be clarified by asking, who owns the property? To secure these rights. The only purpose of our constitutional government is to protect our individual rights. If all rights are property rights, then the only purpose of the Constitution is to protect our property. Property is the one-word answer to any question on the Constitution. You may have noticed earlier that I said life, liberty, and property. This was deliberate. In John Locke's second treatise on government, which was a source document well known to and used by Jefferson in drafting the Declaration of Independence, and by the framers in writing the Constitution, Locke writes, "Every man has a property in his own person. This nobody has any right to but himself. The labor of his body and the work of his hands, we may say, are properly his." He continues, "The great and chief end, therefore, of men uniting in the Commonwealth and putting themselves under government is the preservation of their property. John Adams, who was the second president under the Constitution, puts it even more plainly. He says, the moment the idea is admitted into society that property is not as sacred as the law of God, and that there is not a force of law and public justice to protect it, anarchy and tyranny commence. So why the change to the pursuit of happiness? Because even then, the framers were thinking ahead to the future abolition of slavery, which the Constitution promised would not happen before 1808. This was a compromise to keep the Union together. And please note that at this time, in 1787, 9 of the 13 states still had legalized slavery. By leaving out the word property in the preamble, they entirely subverted the future use of the argument, but they're my property. Also beware of the term constitutional rights. No rights are granted by the Constitution. None. They are inherent in us, given by our Creator. They predate and they supersede the Constitution. This is an all too common twist today. If the Constitution, a document, gives us our rights, then another document or government act could take them away. All our rights come from our Creator, not from any government, not from any government document, and no government act can remove them. But what if I don't believe in God, some people will ask. Well, there's two separate and pertinent answers to this question. The first is that the founders did believe in God, and they were writing from their point of view. The second answer is beautifully stated in John Galt's long speech in the book Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, who did not herself believe in God. Excerpting what Galt said, the source of man's rights is not divine law or congressional law, but the law of identity. Rights are conditions of existence required by man's nature for his proper survival. Any group, any gang, any nation that attempts to negate man's rights is wrong, which means is evil, which means is anti-life. So to reiterate, our rights are individual, inherent, and unalienable, and the only legitimate purpose of government is to protect those rights. Now, we also need to debunk the myth of community rights. Individuals exist. Communities do not have an independent existence. They are made up of individuals who come together to join communities and eventually live as well. You don't start with a block of community and shave off little slivers of individuals. The only way to protect community rights is to protect the individual rights of each and every person in that community, always, without fail, without lapse. You may hear used the phrase, the greatest good for the greatest number. Well, that's the philosophical basis for communism, and it is utterly antithetical to the Constitution and to your freedom and to your rights. If you take this phrase to its logical end, you're in a community of 100 people, and there's only enough food for 90. So the greatest good for the greatest number is to kill 10 people to ensure that there's enough food for the rest. The philosophy of community rights applied to nations in history invariably ends in mass graves. Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, Castro, the terror in France, look them up for yourself, and don't limit your search to the 20th century, because the evil philosophy of the greatest good for the greatest number vastly predates Marx's Communist Manifesto. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for common defense, promote general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Our government, under the Constitution, is the first and only government ever founded based on sovereignty residing with the people. There's a well-established principle in law that goes back to the signing of the Magna Carta in 1215. that the created entity is never greater in legal stature than its creator. We, the people, created the government. We retain sovereignty, and we grant the government privileges in order to perform the duties with which we have charged it. So we, the people, can revoke those privileges whenever we have the guts to demand it. We are also a constitutional republic, and this is greatly different from a democracy. The difference is that a republic is based on laws that no majority vote can overturn. A majority vote democracy can vote to take your property from you up to and including your life, and you have no recourse. Remember community rights? That's an unfettered democracy, as is a lynch mob. In a republic, the safety of your life and property cannot be revoked by majority vote, even if every voter votes to take your property. In a constitutional republic, those basic rules are written at the start, plain for all to see. There's also a lot of talk of left versus right and how different they are from each other. This is the wrong differentiator, and it serves as a distraction. The true difference is the desired degree of government control from none to total. And there's plenty of information on that on my website. So what exactly is the Constitution? It's a framework for the structure of the Confederation of States who agreed to act as a unit for common purposes, namely to present a unified front in international action, trade, diplomacy, war, treaties, as limited by the Constitution, for easing interactions between the states, unified currency, mail delivery, patents, weights and measures, immigration, for mediating conflicts between states, and for very few laws at the federal level, bankruptcy, treason, piracy. The preamble that I just read is the mission statement and what they were trying to do. After 10 years under the Articles of Confederation, the new country was falling apart. It was an imperfect union. They had to beg and cajole the states for money because they had no power to tax. The states imposed tariffs against goods from other states as if they were foreign nations, and there was rampant inflation. Who's heard the term not worth a continental? That was the continental dollar. The convention to revamp the Articles instead came up with a new constitution. The first three articles are ye olde checks and balances, limit, divide, balance authority, trying to keep it in check, and from growing and encroaching on the liberties of we the people. Keep in mind, the sovereign states were very jealous of their own power. They did not want to be subsumed into one nation. So we are a confederation with dual sovereignty. The European Union was based on our confederation. The federal government was granted power by the states and by the people, by way of the Constitution, only to deal with those few areas where a united front is crucial. Those things, international relations, currency, problems between the states. Even on those rare occasions when government is the right solution to a problem, the founders were certain that the best is local, not national, and most areas of jurisdiction were to be left to your states and your towns. Thomas Jefferson said the two enemies of the people are criminals and government, and we must tie the latter in the chains of the Constitution, lest it become a legal version of the former. He also said that my reading of history convinces me that most bad government results from too much government. Articles 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the Constitution address state issues, state and federal interaction, proper procedures for amending the Constitution, the ratification process, and that the Constitution, and only the laws and treaties made in accordance with its strictures, is the supreme law of the land. There are two key phrases here: in pursuance thereof, and under the authority of the United States. They have very specific meanings. They don't mean all laws passed by Congress, all executive orders, all Supreme Court decisions, or all treaties signed and ratified. According to the Dictionary of 1828, pursuance means a process to accomplish something, or in other words, only laws that carry out the powers delegated to the federal government by the Constitution. According to the same source, authority means the legal delegated power to act. This is an additional limit on the actions of the federal government only to those areas specifically given to their authority by the people and the state via the Constitution. Remember again, the created entity is never greater in legal stature than that which created it. We, the people, via the states, created the federal government in our creation, our creature, and subordinate to us. We allot it places where it may act, and it cannot legally exceed those boundaries. That it does so regularly is in large part our own fault for not understanding those limits and enforcing them. The first 10 amendments, known as the Bill of Rights, are all further restrictions on the power of the federal government in favor of the rights of the people and the power of the state. This is made clear in the preamble to the Bill of Rights, which states, in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of federal powers, further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added. An extremely important part of the Bill of Rights is the 10th Amendment. It states, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So what are the powers delegated to the United States by the Constitution? They're the enumerated powers listed for the three branches. Legislative powers are mainly defined in Article 1, Section 8. Executive powers mainly in Article 2, Section 2. Judicial powers are mainly in Article 3. Mainly because there's a few other places in the Constitution that allot specific powers outside of those articles, such as the sections in Article 1 that give the executive veto power. There are certain amendments that also grant additional powers in defined areas, such as the post-Civil War amendments that give Congress power to overrule race-based voting requirements in the southern states. So what are the powers prohibited to the states by the Constitution? Those are listed in Article 1, Section 10. They're basically prohibitions on states acting as separate entities for international purposes. They cannot have their own standing armies. They cannot issue currency other than gold or silver-based. They can't impose customs duties on goods from other states, enter into separate treaties with other countries, or grant titles of nobility. Well, all this is lovely. And what on earth do we do with it? Just a question I was hoping you'd ask. We go back to rights. Powers not delegated to the federal government were reserved to the states in December of 1791, and that's all there is to it. The federal government was created by the Constitution. It is not a party to that compact, and therefore has no power to change the compact itself. Congress, the President, the Supreme Court, none of those have the power to overturn or change the scope of power allotted to the federal government. The right of the state, which created the federal government, to prohibit overreaches of that same government is a natural right, therefore one that predates and supersedes the Constitution. It's called nullification, and has been used time and time again, not frequently enough, to hold back the encroachment of federal power into areas not delegated. Nullify is what the colonies did to the authority of George III of England. It's the action recommended by Madison, Jefferson, and even Alexander Hamilton, who favored a much stronger central government than the other two, in several of the Federalist Papers, plus the Virginia Resolutions of 1798. Nullification was used by the northern states to stop the federal government from forcibly returning escaped slaves to their southern owners. It stopped the Real ID Act of 2005. It has been used to ignore the federal medical marijuana laws. Ultimately, the state and the people are the arbiters of what is and what is not constitutional, not Congress, not the President, and not a bare majority of 5 members of the Supreme Court. A limited government that defines the extent of its own limitations is an oxymoron. Such a thing cannot exist. It will be a limitless government, the very thing the Constitution was written to prevent. James Madison said, the states, then being the parties to the constitutional compact, and in their sovereign capacity, it follows of necessity that there can be no tribunal above their authority to decide in the last resort whether the compact made by them be violated.
Sounds great, Catherine. When can we hear more of this? Plug.
There's plenty more information, articles I've written, YouTube videos, etc. on my website. I also have a U.S. Constitution study group that meets the second Monday of every month in Bedford at the Woburn Sportsmen's Association, and the directions to that and schedule of dates, etc. again on my website. Oh, and which is www.constitutiondecoded.com. It's also on the brochures, the cards, etc. that are out on the table.
How do we get our elected officials to adhere to the Constitution? Because that is our biggest problem. We can stand here and talk about the Constitution, but they won't support the Constitution. What do we do now?
All right. The degradation from leaving the Constitution has been in place for well over 100 years. This is not a sprint. It's not even a marathon. It's an ultra-marathon. We have to start with the people, start locally, then we'll be able to elect people who have a clue about the Constitution and who will stand for it. The very last place you will see change is Washington. The second to the last place is going to be the state legislatures. But until we have a population that, once again, understands the purpose of limited government and the limitations on government in the Constitution, there is no chance, which is why I'm standing here tonight.
Let me just say that when I go to my town meeting and I see my selectmen voting for things that are anti-constitutional, I go up after the meeting and I say, I don't understand your vote, I don't agree with your vote, and here is why you're wrong.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Over here behind the light where I can't see who it is.
I want to ask you about the trampling of the Constitution by Barack Obama right now. How can we, Congress they're all in bed together.
That's where the concept of nullification comes in.
And
The states have the right to nullify, and they should be, and a whole number of states have actually been acting on it. If you go to the 10th Amendment Center website, you'll see that there's a lot of states that are taking some serious action to rein in federal overreach. They're finally waking up. Again, here in liberal Massachusetts, we're not going to see an awful lot. We're all living behind enemy lines, as it were. But if you look at the flyover states, there's an awful lot of action being taken. Again, go to the 10th Amendment Center's website for
But I mean, like the lady said, I mean, it doesn't matter if you have a constitution or not, if they're not going to adhere to it. Now, the real irony here is they're all lawyers.
and they stopped teaching constitutional law 100 years ago.
Right, and they're breaching all kinds of contracts left and right. And there's no one that's holding their feet to the fire in order to adhere to the contract.
Well, we the people have to do that, and we can't do it until we understand the Constitution, which is, again, why I'm here. There's another question over here. Yes, Kevin.
I've been given to understand that we have been under martial law since Abraham Lincoln. And under Abraham Lincoln, the executive orders were also started, and that because he was assassinated, he did not have the ability to rescind the martial law.
This is a common, but it really is a misconception. For details on that, I would recommend the blog of a wonderful constitutional scholar and retired attorney who writes under the name of Publius Hulda. Publius as in the Federalist Papers, and Hulda like the Hulda Gate to the inner temple of Jerusalem. Okay? You had a question, Poppy.
Question. Really good. Okay.
Thank you.
Do you like Barack Obama?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm just giving you.
don't like
You don't.
Obama.
I have never met the gentleman. From everything. I'm sorry.
So you maybe like him, but you don't know yet.
I haven't, like I said, I have never met the man. However, if you read his own writing and his own work, he espouses and actively pursues an agenda that is absolutely antithetical to the Constitution, to the point of being seriously treasonous.
Right.
know, there were plenty of people who despised George Bush, but said he was a really nice man to sit and chat with. So, liking or not liking has no place in this. What he espouses, the agenda he promotes, the things that he is actively trying to do to the country are in absolute opposition to the oath he swore on the Bible to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic.
May I talk?
I'm not done. So, he swore to uphold the Constitution. He is, at the very least, in complete abrogation of his oath. And for that, deserves to be removed from office. Yes, sir.
George W. Bush had a tremendous tax cut. He should not have done that. He should have surplus. We would have been better off if he did surplus, and we would not have the $17 trillion. Clinton started the surplus. He ended it, and he did not do, he should not have ended it. And also, the tremendous tax cut that Bush made was a mistake, and also he should have had surplus to cut the budget.
All right, thank you for your comments. We have here a perfect example of a lack of understanding of the Constitution. The power of the purse strings is in the hands of Congress, specifically the House of Representatives, and them only. The surpluses under Clinton were under a Republican legislative majority. In terms of Bush himself, he was one of the progressives. The Progressive Party USA was started by Teddy Roosevelt, a Republican. However, Woodrow Wilson, who was also a racist and eugenicist, was a progressive. Franklin Roosevelt was a progressive. And every president after Reagan has also been a progressive. The progressives are based in the Fabian Socialists of the United Kingdom. Their symbol is a wolf in sheep's clothing, and their symbol is hammering the world into the shape they want. They are statists. They want 100% government power. The difference between left and right is which version of the social agenda they are pushing, and a very slight difference in spending. We have to return to the Constitution. Was there another question? Yes, sir.
It talked a lot about property. I'm a property.
You have a property in your own body.
Exactly. Don't you think the government is infringing on your property? Come on. And
Well, in
just
about
let-
17 million different ways, but what specifically are you
Let's,
referring to?
just talking about, Obamacare.
It's completely unconstitutional.
Most of it is, that's what I'm saying. Okay, and how, now we have a perfect example on where we can take ground, stand ground. Let's say, let's go out and
This is
bring
where the
to,
states need to nullify, and you will note that there was 28, 29 states have refused to set up the insurance clearinghouses, the exchanges, thank you for the word.
but how about if we all spread the message? Nobody go and sign up.
I don't think you can sign up even if you want.
You can't.
Eventually, it's done. Nobody signs up, no matter what they do.
That would be delightful.
I did it.
Okay, go ahead and move
A
on.
divided voice is not a united body. You have to have one voice. You have to have one voice and one body. All the division that we're seeing, whether it's in the Tea Party or in the Republican Party or even in the Democratic Party, the more divided we are, the more easier we'll be conquered. you have to have one voice as one body.
Well, you have let the communists here in Massachusetts control the congressional delegation. They're all communists except Lynch of South Boston.
All right, we need to make one comment here. The left finds ways to work together despite extremely deep differences. The gay rights lobby and the Muslim extremists who think that all gays should be stoned to death find ways to work together because each of them thinks that they're going to win in the end. I don't think the gay rights lobby has realized that one of those parties is willing to be head and the other is not. The right, the conservatives, the Tea Party also need to learn to work together, and the libertarians have to stop being ticked off with the social conservatives, and the social conservatives have to stop putting their noses up in the air and refusing to sully themselves with those social liberals. Stick together on the Constitution. Remember, we are a confederation, dual sovereignty. The federal government is given jurisdiction over very, very limited areas, mainly to do with international items. Everything else is left to the states and to the people. Get it out of federal control, deal with it at your state level. If you want to be in a socially conservative state, move to Utah. If you want to be in a socially liberal state, move to California. But work together, for gosh sake. Very quickly, sir, because they want to move to the next speaker.
This is the problem. Communism, collective. People like us, conservative individuals,
Herding cats, yes.
big problem. All right?
However, this is not a dualistic universe. Good wins in the end.
Thank you, Catherine. I highly recommend attending one of Catherine's constitutional study groups. Catherine, what is it, the second Monday?
Second Monday of every month.
And it's at the Woburn Sportsman's Club, which is not in Woburn,
No.
it's in Bedford.
It was in Woburn before they built Route 128.
Which was a century or so ago, I think. We're going to take a 30-second break. Just be quiet, though. Just repositioning the cameras.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you.
Oh, God.
Do you want me to buy those drinks, or what do you want me to buy?
Give me John.
I do have my credit card.
No, John up here?
Yeah, because it's, yeah. I got it.
John O'Mara? John O'Mara? Yeah. Turn it off. Let me, okay, turn that off.
Well, I like what you talked All right, we're going to get restarted again. Can you see if you have one? Look down. Thank you, Gene. I want to, before we have our next speaker,
Really, look at Multara.
Ladies and gentlemen, please excuse me. We have another guest here that Ken Endall would like to present. All right. Thank you very much.
all right. Yes, I actually want to talk about some other issues we're working on. We have a few events coming up we want to talk about. First, I want to talk about our efforts with the NDAA. You heard Catherine talking about nullification, and we've taken it to the extreme. We've taken nullification right to the cities and towns in Massachusetts. So we've been working with a group called People Against NDAA. NDAA, for those of you who don't know, is the National Defense Authorization Act. It funds the Defense Department every year, and in the 2012 version, they added some unconstitutional sections that declared the United States to be a battlefield, and people in the United States, citizens, are subject to arrest and indefinite detention. So we've been working with Canada. We've introduced resolutions to 4 towns. 2 towns have approved it so far, the towns of Douglas and Webster. And Northbridge, unbelievably, Joy and Rob, voted it down. Closely, though, very closely, and it was unbelievable. You will see it on YouTube soon, possibly by the end of the week, when you hear the logic about why they voted it down. And on NDAA, it's before the Worcester City Council. It's awaiting a public hearing. In the meantime, we have a NDAA teach-in this Saturday at the Worcester Public Library from 1 to 2:30. Then we have another one in the town of Douglas next Monday night at 7 at the town hall. On the 18th, the Douglas town meeting will take up our resolution. combining it with the education night, we hope we have a better luck than we had in Northbridge. But so far, we're two and one, and soon to be 3 with the city of Worcester. So please, if you're from any of those cities or towns, come out and support it. Next, I'd like to introduce John O'Mara. He's got an event from the Northborough Tea Party, an event on Wednesday evening.
Thank you. Folks, as you all know, we've been in several battles of late. Mr. Obama has kicked our teeth with Obamacare for the moment. We had this fiscal can kicked down the road again. And now he's preaching to his constituency that the next order of business is to grant amnesty to 11 to 20 to 30 million illegal aliens. This is an area that
Have no voting rights.
All right, well, that's exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. The notion that overnight we will get that number of illegal aliens into our community, guess what, folks? Most of these folks will be coming in at the lower end of the pay scales. The black community is in bad shape right now. Probably 40% of the teenagers are unemployed. The black adult population is double the country unemployment. So this is a disaster, not only from an employment situation. I mean, we're in such bad shape right now from an employment perspective, but when you talk about the demographics, and by the way, the 20 million that we're talking about right now will become 30 and 40 and 50 million in short order. So the short of this is, folks, this is an issue of all the things that we're dealing with right now. Illegal immigration, according to Rush Limbaugh, to Ann Coulter, and last night talking with Howie Carr, I asked him what was his most serious concern about all the issues that we're dealing with. Immediately he said illegal immigration. Therefore, this Wednesday we have a young man coming in. His name is
We deport them.
Yes. Michael David Lynch. Dennis Michael Lynch is a one-man army who's been all over this country recording, going down on the southern borders, capturing on film what's actually happening. Those porous borders, overnight, I mean, they're bringing in hundreds and thousands of people, illegals, and of course, the Border Patrol people have their hands tied with this administration who is telling them, you can't do your job, and if you do your job, you're going to be persecuted. So our law enforcement, they have their hands strapped. So this guy, Dennis Michael Lynch, has filmed it. He's been on Hannity. He's been on Megyn Kelly. He's been on Huckabee. And he's coming to Hudson on Wednesday. He's got an amazing track record. And if you want to be inspired, I was talking with him today, and every time I start to feel a little bit down, folks, we need some pep. We need to be inspired. We've gotten kicked so often that we have to win a battle. And this is one that we've been working on for the last month with the congressman and with Jessica Vaughn, who is a professional, 20 years within this area. Anyway, please, I urge you, if you want to hear what's up and how we can do something to prevent blanket amnesty, Dennis Michael Lynch will be with us. And by the way, he's made 2 award-winning DVDs, documentaries. They Come to America, the cost of amnesty, parts 1 and 2, and for $10, which is the admission fee, we get both of them. They go for about $20 each. So the place is the Hudson Portuguese Riverside Club. This Wednesday, November 6th. Doors open at 6:30. Program begins at 9. It'll be ending at 9. But if you want further information, very simply, go to AmericaFirstImmigrationReform.org, for short, AFIR.org, and you can get all the information that's necessary. By the way, I posted some of these flyers. If you don't have one and you would like one, just let me know, and we'll get them in your hands. That's it.
Thank you, sir. something else that's going on is the referendum effort with the tank the gas tax. The gas tax, as you all know, went up 3 cents, and now it's an index to inflation in Massachusetts. So there is a referendum effort underway now to repeal the automatic increases. It'll force the legislature to vote for the increases if they want to increase the gas tax. If you let them get away with making this automatic, they will find ways to make other taxes automatically increase. So it's important to stop this one. So I got an email today. They need something like 80 to 100. I think they need around 80,000 signatures to get on the ballot, but they need to collect around 100,000 to make sure that they get 80,000 certified signatures. And the number I saw today was they have 55,000. They have 3 more weeks to go, so they need a lot more signatures. And anything you can do. I have a few petitions up here, but we've got more on the table over here. So we're running out of time to get the signatures. Somebody back there.
Just a clarification, the verification, verified signatures, 68,911. There were 2 weeks left, everything had to be turned in to the city and town clerk by November 20th.
Okay, so we need 68,000 signatures, but the way we verified, so we need a lot more because people sign them and they're not registered, or they sign in the wrong town, or you can have entire petitions thrown out for various reasons by town clerks, so we need a lot more. So you can go to online, look up Tank the Gas Tax for that. Next, I would like Christine Moravito to come up for a minute to talk about an event that Greater Boston Tea Party is doing.
On Saturday, November 16th, we're having our 2nd annual Citizen Watchdog Training. We are part